from inception. What value have you added to the federal government, to the GDP of this country? Because by projection, you are to make $10 billion in addition to our GDP by 2033, which from all indication, even 1% of this, you cannot be able to add. So we want to know so far how much, what value have you added? What have you added to the GDP for you not to be merged as a department under the NSI? So we need to know that, because you have just been spending monies. We have checked your record. You have just been traveling, spending a lot of taxpayers' money without adding any value so far. So we need to know this explanation in details. What have you done so far? What have you brought on board? And aside from collection of assets, landed assets, either properties or and so on from agencies, we need to know this, please.
Thank you, Chair. I sit here and I'm lost. I'm angry because this is a government functional institution. We don't function by theories. MD sir, you spoke so well. You said plenty things. By the way, my name is Daniel Asama. I represent Basa and Jos North Federal Constituency. I'm from Plateau State. I don't really believe that this thing should be done theoretically. To me, I just heard lectures. You just lectured me. Very good lecture, a lot of education. But I need documents to refer to. I've made to understand that you were on notice to present your update. What you have done so far, what you have achieved so far as an agency. You don't come with verbal things. You don't come and be talking. You give me documents. If you give us documents, we make reference to all these things we're talking about. These questions being skipped would have been answered because we refer back to them. You gave us these 3 pages of some projective executive summary of something you are projecting to want to do. I thought I would come here and I will have all those things you are telling me written on a document that we're going to be going back and front and talking about them. What is empirical about all this discussion? After we leave here, how are we passing this forward? What is going to be documented? You see, our clerk is writing. That means we need some kind of documentation. We don't work without documentations here. So, Chairman, sir, I've been thinking since I sat here and I hear people asking questions, I think all of this lack of documentations that were supposed to be presented as updates is what is affecting all this communication. We keep going back and front on the same questions and we keep going back and front and we're not getting the answers. Because we have seen how much they have traveled, we have seen how much they have spent, we have seen how much have come in as inflow, we have seen how much they have expended. We need documentation from these people. This theoretical talking will not get us anywhere.
Thank you, Chairman. Your information is noted.
Yeah, Chairman, I think we'll be having interaction with MOFI, not today, not tomorrow.
I probably want to help MOFI. I want to avail you by putting some questions to you. I was opportune also to be at that retreat, but I left. And I'm sure at that retreat, issues related to the establishment of a register, access to register, were identified. We are all bookkeepers. And that's why those things were rolled out. Mr. Chairman, sir, of all the documents you have seen here, they are nothing but asset management life cycle. Am I right? Yeah. Am I right? Issues relating to when you talk of asset register, for instance, which I have just identified, have you developed frameworks to identify and mitigate risk associated issued with public asset? Have you done that? That is risk management, which I remember was identified at that meeting. That was not done. If you had done that, I'm sure some of the issues raised by our members would have been solved. Leakages to financial management. Have we done that? This document has not said anything relating to leakages to financial management. And is a register is an asset register or a unit in the asset register that will link you with government accounting and budgeting system. You know better than me because you are in it. So that issue has not also been identified here. Issue relating to reporting and transparency. All these are issues that were not, Chairman, captured. And lastly, our deputy wanted to ask you a question directly. I wanted to ask you a question. Or he rather put it, but not directly. Very simple. That portal that you have upgraded, is it functional? Thank you very much.
All right, gentlemen, MOFI management should really just come open on what the problems are. I think there are definitely problems. And when you set out on a journey with a plan, and the plan is not working, we have to just begin to look at it. All the suggestions of, MOFI being part of NSIA and all of that, I think they probably will not have come, because this is an agency that we have all been thinking high hopes.
Now, your classes of assets include the corporate assets. According to you, corporate assets wholly and partly owned by the federal government, including shares of publicly traded entities, limited liability entities, and foreign-based and other businesses. We'd like you to give us a list of these assets, home and abroad. List of these assets, home and abroad. Improvement that you have made thereupon, and how it has helped our GDP. Another class of asset that you manage is the financial asset, which includes public and private equities, investments, fixed income, and hedge funds. The fixed assets includes the real estate. We need you to give us a list of those estates. I was listening to the radio this morning when they were talking of the legal disposal of some real estates belonging to NNPC, where you own 50% of the shares. We want to know whether you are the one selling those assets. Nigerians would like to know. We would like to have the value of each of these real assets, revenue made through them for the past 10 years, and contribution that they have made to the GDP. Another class of assets is the cash flow generating transactions, such as the concession agreement and the PPP. I want you to give us the list of those concessions. I know you have been working with ICLC, Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission. We want to have a list of all the concessions under your care right now, and tell us the revenue with evidence from such concession. The last class of assets are the minerals and the intangible assets, which includes hydrocarbon. We want to know the extent of your investment in them and what has come to Nigeria as a result of those investments. According to the record that you furnished us with, you said 80% of whatever you get are put into new investment fund, and then you put them into identified sectors, including manufacturing, digital services, and agriculture. We want you to furnish the committee in real time how much of that. We don't want 80%. 80% of whatever we got, we have invested. What is the specific amount? Yes, where did it go? Whether it was into manufacturing, whether it was into digital services, whether it was into agric. According to you, you have a list of 52 companies in your portfolios with an estimated 18 trillion naira value and over 15,000 employees, according to your record, which makes you a major driver of our economy. We want a list of those companies, 52 companies. Your employees, and how much you have recouped for Nigeria from such investments. Like I mentioned, I know you are aware that we agree with you that most of federal government assets are not documented. They are not even delineated, which allows for all those encroachments. Since inception, and since your appointment about 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, or when were you appointed? No, I'm not talking of the renewal, the first one.
Yes, only last year.
Hmm?
It's only last year, just about a year.
Just about a year now.
Yeah. MOFI didn't exist as an operating entity until February last year.
Okay, but you have been there. You have been there for some
Yeah, but it's
time.
not 5 years.
Ah, okay, but not 5 years. For how long? How long? How long? How long? No, but it's okay. It's okay.
How long? He has been with MOFI.
It's okay. It's okay. We just want to know how many title documents you have been able to obtain for our assets. And how many you have been able to protect, like Honorable Anka mentioned, from further encroachment. Lastly, you said as part of your mission is to invest with intent of preserving the socio-economic value through catalyzing growth in priority sector, according to you. In your report, we would like you to refer us to the section of the law where you are permitted to take money from the budget. If you are not permitted by law to take money from the budget, how you have been getting funded since you came into office. We'd like to have that. Lastly, we'd like to know how much has been voted, budgeted for MOFI the last 5 years, and how much you have spent, and for what purpose you spend those money. No. Additional. To furnish those documents, after which we'll fix another date for hearing. Because so far, MOFI has just wasted our whole time for today. MOFI has just wasted the time of Nigerians, taxpayers' money, time, today. And we must not allow that to happen again.
Finish. It's before you. Take us through the progress. At the end, we will determine whether you have achieved something or you have not achieved something.
So I'll just give you 2 minutes to do that.
To Bond, the former Bond Hotel, where we had that retreat,
Yes.
there are some specific things that we agreed, which should be the foundation of MOFI. And that foundation of MOFI is a law that will make you to have the asset register. And I remember I told you at that time that I was part of the team or the committee that was sponsoring a bill to get an asset register for BPE. I told you people then. And I said, you should work fast. Because if the act of BPE goes through, all these things you are doing will be not.
All right,
so
thank
what
you.
you need to tell us, how far have you gone on those things?
Before I allow any other person.
Taking money to finance themselves from the national budget. How did they find themselves into that again? So these are 3 legs that we have, this committee, under your leadership, Mr. Chairman, because there are still other cases that they will still need to answer later, apart from the one we are talking about here.
All right, that's excuse.
The assignment you've given us, we've made significant progress on it. So we've approached it in different ways. So the first is around the different asset classes. The first category of asset class that we've taken is the corporate assets. These are entities that have already been incorporated, and they regularly publish their financial statements, which are audited. So what we've also done is that in order to ensure that we have visibility and also transparency in terms of what's going on with each of those businesses, we've worked with each of those entities to collect their financial statements. At the moment, we've started work on looking at the financial statements for 2021, 2022, and 2023.
Okay.
And the next thing is that a lot of those numbers have already been tallied, and then we're going to get one of the big 4 firms to give us an opinion on those financial statements. That will have a consolidated financial statement on the corporate assets. That work is ongoing at the moment. The plan is to be able to publish that for the entities that have audited financial statements. That way, we can publicly know the holdings we have in each of these corporate assets that have also been audited and signed off on by reputable firms. That's on the corporate assets. In terms of the non-corporate assets, which are the assets related to the different sectors, we engaged Ministry of Foreign Affairs on the foreign-based assets. And we've spoken to them, so they've set up a team for us to work with them to identify each of those foreign-based assets, first of all, to know where they are located, and then begin to look at how to assign, to get valuation on each of those assets. But the other thing they also said, honorable members, that I think is also important for us is that what they said to us is that for some of the assets, what they've realized is that there are some of them that they really may not need for the diplomatic services that they could use for joint ventures. That way, the revenues from there can be used to build properties in areas where they are renting, which they call the rationalization aspect of it. And then, of course, there will be options for concessioning of those as well as ways of optimizing the assets, because there are some that are really not being used and are not generating any revenues. That work is ongoing as well. We've also engaged the Ministry of Housing because of the size of the properties that the Ministry of Housing has for federal government. We started that work as well with them. And the idea is to be able to create a land bank where not only do we know where those properties are, but also the recertification of it. Because for many of the federal government-owned properties, if you ask for the certificate of ownership, a lot of the times you can't find it because of the lack of available records. So that work, we're working with the ministry, but the ministry has also started some work with the World Bank, which is the recertification of federal government landed properties, both built and unbuilt. And the idea is to be able to provide that visibility over there. And first of all, let me commend the committee for some of the work you've been doing with respect to some of the lands that you've been able to identify and also stop activities that really and truly should not have started without the right approval for that. I think that's also helping us as well in terms of elevating the awareness about the need for us to ensure that not only do we have a database of those assets, but there is a process for either concessioning them or to sell them or to go into joint ventures. Otherwise, there will be too much chaos in that space. And I think you've helped us elevate a lot of that conversation. And you're doing a lot of things that we cannot do on our own. And we want to thank you as far as the landed properties are concerned. On the power assets, which is also another large area where we have a lot of investment across the value chain, from the disco side, the generation side, the gas companies as well. That's actually one of the reasons why I came late. There's an interministerial committee working group that has been set up to look at the cross-cutting issues across the various sectors, which we're working with them to identify interagency collaboration, to identify each of those various assets. Some of them already have the assets enumerated, but not valued in terms of their current valuation. We're working with them to see how we can work together as a group, including the regulators, to have a database of each of those assets and go through a process of valuing them so that we can be able to accountable not only to this committee, but to Nigerians as a whole. And then, of course, there are concession assets as well, working with ICRC, because in each concession, there's an underlying asset, and they vary from one sector to the other. You have port concessions, you also have landed properties and other businesses that have been concessioned as well. But we need to ensure that not only do we have a repository of the assets that form the basis for the concession, but also to have the value for each of those assets, again, as part of the assignment that you've given us, sir.
Thank you. Before Dr. Takang, you recall that in March, the committee wrote a letter to your agency on the sales of federal government assets to fund the budget. And as custodian of this asset, 350 billion was projected from the sale of this asset in 2018-2019. And another 270 billion was projected when the president was presenting the 2020 budget as part of the funding for the 10.5 trillion naira budget for that year. My question, what is the status of the highlighted assets that were earmarked for sale? 2, what due diligence did MOFI take so far on these assets? Bearing in mind your response to the committee in April, when we last met, you alluded to the fact that you don't have the details of those transactions, so you cannot furnish us with information that we requested for at that time. However, in May, your agency and BP had come to an understanding to work together, and both parties agreed on a framework for cooperation. So as a custodian of these assets, what is the status of the sales of these assets? Afam Power PLC, Geregu, Yola Electric Distribution Company, Omotosho IPP, Calabar IPP, all the river basin authority that you listed at that time, the committee would like to know what is the status report on these transactions. You can note that while you take some other questions from members.
Coincidentally, I was the mover of that motion that asked MOFI to work with Nigeria Institute of Estate Surveyors and Valuers to enumerate the assets of Nigeria. And I had met with the president of the Estate Valuers Association recently, and he said they have not been contacted regarding the valuation of these properties. And, but they have, however, gotten note of the submission from you guys that you are already getting it done. So, however, he had sent his members to send their profiles to you. So this is my question. Have you started work on these assets being enumerated and listed in the platform? Because your director said you've already started. And before you came, he said you're having problems getting these properties from MDAs. So another question after this, have you started? The MDAs that are refusing to send you the list, are you telling me that MOFI do not have the power to get this list without walking into these MDAs or these agencies? I think that you as a body should be able to get this list without even contacting these MDAs and evaluating and enumerating this list. And for your director to say that you've already started this platform, I would like to know how many MDAs and agencies do you guys already have evaluated? And what is the work relationship between you and the NIESV, Estate Surveyor and Valuers? Are you people in good rapport in this, or you are working alone as valuers yourself? Because I think you guys are not licensed to value properties in Nigeria. And my last question, sorry, Chairman. Have you received funding from the federal government? MD, are you with me? Yes. Yeah, have you received funding from the federal government regarding this program? And if you have, I would like to know how much have you expended from this project? Because me, I'm a rep member. I'd like to follow up on motions that I move. For it was passed in the House and it was carried. And I think you guys have to give us a very detailed report on how far you've gone, because I've not gotten any report from them, Chairman, so far. So
Thank you, Honorable Sisa.
I was at the retreat we had at Bonn Hotel some time ago, and one of the presentations, there was this discussion that some properties of the federal government are actually registered on the name of personal individuals. This committee will know how far you've gone in recovering this, because, you know, at the time of that retreat, we said it's an aberration for somebody to register government property on his or her name. It's not heard of. So we, you know, talked about that, and we asked you to look at it and see how you reverse these abnormalities and everything. So I would want to know how far you've gone with that. Very, very important. I want to ask you about NSIA, because I'm actually part of the Rossana report, and I'm looking at vis-a-vis your work and what the NSIA does, and to see if it's a duplication of work, and to see if we probably will merge people or what. I'm not just, you know, thinking out loud. I want to know your work, the difference between you and NSIA and everything, and to see way forward from there. And if you're supervising NSIA, we'll want to know, because NSIA invests our money, how much, how far have you followed up to know the properties, the expenditures, and everything that concerns NSIA. So this just a few of this, and I will take it from. Thank you very much.
Honorable members, let's allow the MD to answer.
Let me start with the one that has to do with the specific assets that the chairman referred to. Some of those, they were were some that were privatized earlier on, and those have been totally privatized, but there are others that are still under Niger Delta Power Holding Company. About 5 of them are under Niger Delta Power Holding Company. If you recall, the last administration actually started a process for sale of those, but that process wasn't completed, and they were not sold, and it's still ongoing, still with NCP. As you know, nothing could happen until the board of Niger Delta was reconstituted, which was done recently. So those 5 major power plants that are under, and that's the NIPP under Niger Delta, are still government's properties until that process is completed, or if the government decides to proceed with that, they're still under Niger Delta Power Holding Company. In terms of Yola Disco is also one of those that the initial private sector buyers left under the guise of force majeure, and then government had to pay them back and then took over the asset. But there's been a process that has been started to sell the 60% to private investors at the moment. But the 40% owned by government is still there, like many other discos at the moment. In terms of the river basin authorities, that also is one of the asset classes that was listed by BPE for privatization. But that also is an exercise that is still ongoing. We can get some more the feedback in terms of the actual status of that, because that's handled by NCP, and report back to this committee in terms of where we are on the river basin, because they had advertised it recently, but we need to get a real update from the NCP on that so we can provide that feedback to yourselves. Then the second question from another.
So who is actually in charge of this transaction, you or BPE?
When it has to do with privatization or commercialization, is BPE. That is how they were set up.
The specific one that we're talking about now.
Correct, yes, sir. If
BPE.
it's going to privatization, it's BPE that is supposed to. That is how we've been set up.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
So the second question has to do with, from Honorable Sosa, has to do with the motion. First of all, thank you very much for moving that motion. I think that also elevated the visibility and the relevance of the importance of this very important topic. The work has started, and it is in this context. You know, that work has different phases. What we are doing so far is engaging the MDAs to work with them to, at the very minimum, get a list of those assets, because we need to present a list of assets to valuers for them to value. They will not go and get the list from the MDAs, because that's our job as the MDAs. The MDAs will not even give that information to them anyway, because they're external parties. So most of the work we've done so far is to liaise with the different MDAs to get that information from them, in readiness to now start engaging with the valuers to do the valuation. And we cannot do the valuation because, as you know, we have to work with the estate surveyors to work to identify those, which is why we had actually started the process of, we did an advert, not invitation for tender, but it was procurement notice to notify the key stakeholders that this exercise will go through the procurement process. But that process, which is when we will engage the valuers to do the valuation. In the meantime, what we're doing is to make sure we have a repository of those different asset classes from the various MDAs that we can work with to get, so that when we're now ready to give it to the valuers, we're giving them specific assets for them to start with, rather than just giving them an open-ended check that will go and look for it. That doesn't make any sense, because for them to even determine how much it's going to cost to do the valuation, they need to have gotten some preliminary information, which is what we're gathering at the moment, which is why I just talked about the issue of Ministry of Power, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and then I also talked about Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That is the exercise to get that basic information.
Don't you think in order to save time, it is better to do everything together at the same time? While you are trying to get the title document for those assets, you are at the same time giving value to them.
No, sure. Chairman, you're right.
I mean, it's something that can be done to save time.
Yeah, that's why we've done, we did that.
The country is in an emergency state.
Absolutely.
Right?
You're right, Chairman. That's why we also advertise on it from the procurement side. You know, of course, based on procurement law, before you engage someone to do that, there's a process you have to go through, which is why we had sent out the procurement notice to notify them before we now do the advert to engage them. In the meantime, so we're doing it in parallel. So it's not like sequential. We're not waiting until we finish one before we do the other one.
Yes, it's mine. Yeah.
Was the adverts on the newspaper, or how was it advertised?
The notice, the procurement notice was in the newspaper. There were 3 newspapers, including the Tenors Journal, that the BPP uses. Yeah, that's the procurement notice. So when it comes to the invitation to tender, we would advertise that one.
I have information on that procurement. Should I have a copy?
No, he has not finished with his question. He asked about whether they have received any funding for this exercise.
No,
Yes.
So thank you very much for that question. So when you passed the motion and you also wrote to us, we actually wrote to the Minister of Finance and had discussions with him because again, that's a special project. It was not part of a regular budgeting that we had. But we also recognize very clearly that that is an important exercise that has to be done. And we know the value that it will bring not only to the country, but even to the ministry as well in terms of revenues that would accrue. And we've written to the ministry, and we're working with them to find ways that we can find resources to get that done as a special project. And we're on that now.
So
The funding. No money has been released for that now.
Sorry, you just keep mentioning BPP, if I may ask.
Yes,
Just a writer.
Sure.
Does it mean that procures for you?
So as you know, the law states that if you're spending, if you're procuring an item, and at least 35% of what you're going to spend comes from government, you have to follow the BPP law, and that's why we have to make sure that we use BPP, the Public Procurement Law of 2007, and that's the context for it. If we were using funds from another source, that would be different. But because we're expecting government to fund this as a major government project, we're expected to follow the Public Procurement Law of 2007. That's what I'm referring to the BPP.
So how do you, since you don't have any money yet? Since you don't have any money yet, so how are you going to pay for this? How are you going to fund it?
That's what I just explained, that we've written to the Minister of Finance, based on the letter you had sent to us.
So since, what he's saying in essence is that since December, you have not gotten any funds. So what have you been doing without funding?
No, funding for this project.
Yes?
So-
Even for your work.
No, so
Even for your work. As MOFI.
So what I'm speaking to is specifically project
Because your
funding.
work is not, the truth of the matter is that the work that you do